So I just wanted to say, I've been on YouTube for a little while, but I'm kind of out of touch with a lot of things and I don't really know how to use some equipment properly, etc. So the best way that I have to record sound is on a sound recorder. It's so much better than the sound on my phone that I'm going to use it for this. I also thought I'm wary of doing response videos where it kind of comes across as bullying.
A Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack.
Because I want the response videos to be entertaining, I want them to be funny. I don't care if they're offensive, but I want an actual kind of dialogue to take place. And I understand that when you don't show your face and you're talking to someone who is showing their face, that there's a kind of unequal relationship there. So I just wanted to say I show my face in other videos if you want to see it. Anyway, thanks for that. For those that are new to this channel is currently designed to both entertain its owner, myself, RubbleOfEmpires, and also to debunk the Western medicalized concept of gender identity. The RubbleOfEmpires channel currently aims to demonstrate that gender identity is not a left-wing concept, but instead a conservative and reactionary one. This argument usually baffles most gender theists, i.e. those that believe in innate gender identities, because many of them are very young, and like all religious movements that target children, gender theism does not produce profound thinkers. I like to think that their social dynamic is a lot like Jesus' camp, but with gender.
Our firm belief is there are two kinds of people in the world. People who love Jesus and people who don't.
Let's stand to our feet. Hallelujah. I need you to get serious with God. Say, God, I'm here to be trained. I'm here for an education. I'm willing, God. I'll do what you want me to do. I'll say what you want me to say. In Jesus' name. Amen. If you don't open your mouth, the Holy Spirit can't talk. All right, now I want everyone to raise your hands and we're going to pray in tongues. Hallelujah. Let's do it. Oh, we love you, Jesus. So koho rashada kahala busida. Lo rashada kahala busida. Let the Holy Spirit fall. He's here. Feel his power. Feel his power. See you, doctor. And the Holy Spirit's just going to whisper in your ear what to say. You have the answer.
How do you feel now?
I can't move.
You have the answer. Don't stop. Don't stop. This is the greatest day of your life next to the day you got saved. Let me say something about Harry Potter. Warlocks are enemies of God.
Now, obviously, this is not true of every gender theist or every person under 30, but historically it is a noticeable trend in a similar way that it tends to be people over 60 or whatever that are susceptible to dementia. So, in the same way that a 5-year-old can't really appreciate what it even means when they are asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? A person who hasn't lived long enough to see the popular culture of their youth go out of fashion can also find it very difficult to determine what cultural artifacts are of genuine value and what stuff just happens to be popular right now. This is why "don't you know how old that is" is a popular insult for people under 30. The more online the demographic, the worse this tendency seems to be, which makes millennials, and especially Gen Z, the most severely affected generation so far. This is nothing against people under 30. After all, Television had been doing exactly the same thing to every generation before them for decades. Society had known for many generations before Gen Z that television posed a social threat. At least by the 80s, it was more than obvious that this box in the corner wasn't just another regular gadget. Instead, it remains a powerful tool with immense brainwashing capabilities. Hence, televisions being dubbed the idiot box. But no matter how obvious a problem is, capitalism can't do self-assessment. See climate change. And domesticated humans really like TV. In fact, we like it so much that we allowed it to transform our entire societies, even our brains themselves, to the point that we finally ended up just giving birth to a generation of awesome high-def pocket color TVs with people attached to them. It's pretty cool. They all have inbuilt clocks, radios, telephone, and calendar capabilities. And now, because our society is a bunch of TV junkies, the dialogue that the older generation is given to participate in this manufactured generation gap is to be angry at kids for not being raised addicted to TV properly, which then generates profits for cultural capitalists who sell participation in this phony war. It has literally been the same gap since the 1950s.
Next, ladies and gentlemen, we have three fine young men from Seattle.
In a modern context, obviously teenagers are still teenaged, but in 2016, with a university of information at every person's fingertips, we still, somehow, have grown adults complaining about other people's pants or their hair color.
The whole thing with the hair, it's all bullshit. I really like your hair.
Which is fine, if that's your thing, but I don't really give a shit about what you're wearing or what your name is. What this channel is more concerned with is that there is a capitalist homosexual sterilization cult that has grown very popular and is claiming an increasing number of victims.
Hey everyone, it's me, Ben, or GNC Centric, and today I'm going to do a video about how I, a lesbian, believed for many years that I was a gay trans man.
This time next year, I will be living my life as a man.
You said that with such great conviction. You've made your mind up.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you like being a woman at all?
No.
Wouldn't that be just the worst feeling in the world?
I've hated it since I started developing. I hate it now. I cannot look at myself in the mirror and love the person that's there. I can't do it. I've tried my entire life since I started developing.
So because I had dysphoria, the fact that I hated my female body was like unquestioned and acceptable. So hating my female body, being in denial of being female, being in denial of like having a female sexuality, and just like hating my body was totally acceptable and nobody questioned it. So it made me fine with hating being female and thinking that I was a male. Everybody around me said that was fine, that was normal.
Great conviction.
So I thought that like after being on testosterone long enough and after getting a mastectomy that I would eventually like pass and I would be good enough for a gay man. Like literally I had like, I can't believe looking back, I had such a small, like such horrible self-esteem, like such a horrible view of myself.
I cannot look at myself in the mirror and love the person that's there.
I just wanted to be like good enough to be a bottom, and I thought I would have sex like always facing away and like never facing my partner, and I would like only ever have anal because that's like what I thought a gay guy would want, and that like I didn't know what orgasm, the females could orgasm, so I was like, I'll never orgasm and like I won't have a penis, but as long as he's happy, I'll be happy. Like that was what I was like looking for. That was like, when I grow up, that's what I'll have and I'll be happy.
And my dad. Oh my God, hi.
When I grow up, that's what I'll have and I'll be happy. So if you haven't caught on, all of this is like based on internalized lesbophobia. I will explain. So I hated my female body. I hated all female bodies. Anything to do with like female experience of sexuality was like out of my mind and like irrelevant to me. The concept of like lesbians was like always out of my mind. It was something I couldn't even think about. It was something that was like irrelevant to me, which I recognize now is just denial.
Oh, absolutely.
So nobody challenged these feelings for me. In the queer community, it was like, oh, well, that just means you're trans. But nobody challenged that, like, this could just be, like, you hate being female because you can't accept that you're a female homosexual on some level. I don't know. Like, nobody challenged or me. And nobody, they talk all the time in the trans community about, like, being your true self and stuff. But, like, nobody gives you the tools for self-exploration. They just give you labels and they give you, like...
She's transgender!
Rhetoric, and they give you, like, experiences that you should find similar, and there you go. Like, they don't give you tools for anything to do with exploring the self, or, like, self-actualization, other than to, like, copy someone else, basically. So, the concept of, like, being with a man is inevitable is, like, it's part of compulsory heterosexuality. I'm gonna put a link to Adrian Rich's essay, Compulsory Heterosexuality, for you guys. So yeah, despite, like, feeling that I was supposed to be with a man, I changed it from a straight man to a gay man, because then that took out the, like, heterosexual possibility of babies. Like, not literally, of course, if it was possible I could have gotten pregnant or something if I had actually, like, done that. But, like, in my mind, I was, like, with two gay men, the whole thing of, like, being a mother is, like, not even there, so I don't have to worry about that. Which, again, is, like, another way that I was in denial of my femalehood. I think that this was just, like, my mind finding ways, like, very slowly over time to cope and make a situation where I was with a man sexually a survivable situation. So, I think that what I just described is not unique. Because I'm going to put a link to a Twitter thread or two in the bio here. I mean, in the description. Because I know, like, at least 6 lesbians who are detransitioned or re-identified who used to believe or live or act that, like, they were gay trans men because they believed they were. And then, like, after detransitioning or re-identifying, or they realized they were homosexual females, or they realized they were homosexual females and that's why they detransitioned. That was kind of what happened with me. And I think that there is a significant number of trans-identified females right now who are in relationships with men, who are on Grindr, who are having sex with men, who their entire relationship is based on dissociation. Their entire sexuality is based on dissociation. It's extremely unhealthy, and I worry a lot about them. Like, I know some people are going to find this offensive, but I think there's a lot of trans-identified females who are actually lesbians who have so much internalized lesbophobia that they've gone from, like, I'm a female who's attracted to females, even if it's, like, in the back of their mind something that they can't acknowledge, to the very opposite end as far as they could go to I'm a male who likes males. As far as you can get from lesbians is gay men, right? As far as you can get from ever interacting with another female body is being a gay man, right? And also, like, gay men, there's, like, a bit of a, like, we hate female bodies, vaginas are gross, that kind of thing. Like, when you hang out with gay men and you already hate your female body, they're, like, reinforcing your dysphoria, and you feel like, oh, this is right. They feel the same way as I do. So I think there's probably a lot of lesbians who are in that situation right now who, were they in a different environment, they wouldn't be acting that way, or experiencing those feelings, I'm guessing. So the one thing that helped me so much was I went to Michigan Family Reunion in 2017, and there was just so many butch lesbians everywhere. They weren't, like, trying to be masculine, or they weren't, like, trying to be trans men. They were just naturally butch, and, like, they weren't, like, putting thought into it, or, like, it wasn't an act or a costume. And I realized, like, that's just like me. I'm just naturally like that. And then seeing all of these, like, lesbians of like different ages, seeing that they're like happy and they're okay and everything is fine. And also, in that festival, there was no males allowed, so a lot of the females would walk around without their shirts on. And just seeing these lesbians who were so comfortable with their bodies, it had a big impact on me. Yeah. So it helped me a lot. Like, the number one thing I would recommend for somebody who is, like, struggling to realize if they're a lesbian or not is to, like, hang out with some lesbians. Yeah. So that's the end of my video.
The reason why gender theism, the belief in gender identity, falls down so often in sports is because one of the social functions of sport is to distinguish biological fact from fiction. Every town has their local hero, but as a society, the grand final is our most scientific attempt to come to an objective measurement of who is the more successful athlete. As trite as this might sound, sport doesn't care about your feelings. This has been one of the dynamics that has sometimes made sport such a powerful agent of progressive social change. For example, white society and their allies could call Muhammad Ali the name Cassius, but they couldn't beat him in the ring. Likewise, Hitler could attempt to build a master race, but he couldn't make them win at his own Olympics.
I'm telling you, man, that's the funny thing about Hitler. Just let me finish. Let me work my way through this idea. No, that's my favorite sports clip is that Jesse Owens shit. I just love it because their whole angle was fucked up. He made Hitler leave in like the third quarter, right? He's putting down his number one finger, just fucking walking out of the stadium. Jesus Christ. Their whole thing was like, we are going to create a superior race. It's like, dude, I think we accidentally already did that. Yeah, we sent a select group of people to the gym every day for a couple hundred years. It's paying dividends. They're fucking dunking on us every day. Dude, how quiet was that limo ride home with Hitler? You know what I'm saying? You know he was talking crazy shit when they were on the way there. They were all amped up. We are going to dominate, Sieg Heil, just going off. That whole ride home, they're just sitting there all quiet. You're sitting next to an even angrier than usual Adolf Hitler, trying to make some sort of small talk, like, it is one nice day, isn't it? You know, nice boot.
But I'm an atheist, I can hear the progressives saying.
I get good grades, I go to church.
Yes, you are. Kind of. But just as conservative atheists don't think they can be wrong because they are atheist, progressive atheists don't think they can be wrong because they are progressive. Which is to say, so-called progress isn't without its problems. There are times when being in favor of progress can be a good thing. But for capitalism, progress is just another word for colonization. This is because anything new that the system discovers must be commodified in order to be valued, respected, or sometimes even recognized. It is also important to remember that progressive and conservative are relative terms. For someone who has only ever considered politics in a modern and/or domestic context, the significance of this may not be apparent. So, to illustrate, during the colonization of Australia, there were at least two schools of thought amongst the white European colonizers. One was to violently exterminate all Aboriginal people. This would perhaps be what we might call the conservative position. On the other hand, the progressive position of the time was merely to steal all the Aboriginal children and wipe out Aboriginal cultures through what was perceived to be a more soft, gentle and kind form of genocide.
Come and get your rations. Hurry up.
fellas camp.
Mine is mine, get mine!
It's the law, Mort.
Still, it's good to have science on our side, too.
As you know, every Aborigine born in this state comes under my control.
The progressives at the time thought they were being kind and helpful by taking this approach. Again, this is not to dismiss the idea of cultural evolution. Instead, I am trying to highlight the ways in which political agendas can be both progressive and extremely harmful. Another example of this is shown in my video where I discuss the People's Temple. This was a left-wing cult from the United States in the 1960s. This movement, which was popular and widely supported by US Democratic Party politicians, shares a lot of similarities with modern-day gender theism. This brings us to the subject of today's video, which is a video by the channel Jangles ScienceLad. I know basically nothing about this channel except for the fact that when it became apparent that I had been unintentionally misgendering Gushin during our earlier interactions, Jangles ScienceLad was kind enough to step up and offer me a male debate opponent who does not have a trans identity. So, I went to his channel and started looking for gender-related videos. Jangles does what appears to my very amateur eye to be a halfway decent rebuttal of a statistic which Ben Shapiro uses a lot that says trans people post-op have something like a 40% rate of suicide. He breaks down the data in an interesting way, but I don't really have time or the inclination to cross-check it, as that particular statistic has never appeared on my channel, and I have never really discussed or explored any connection between suicidality and gender identities. So instead, I chose to focus on a small section at the beginning of one of his videos, which was titled Trans Activists versus Facts. In this video, Jangles parodies a conservative, incel-influenced facts and logic type of guy. As previously mentioned, most of this video is concerned with sources that I do not require for my arguments. Instead, I decided to focus on the very brief sports-related section at the beginning of the video. I did this for a number of reasons. These include the fact that I believe that sport is one of the areas in which the general public can most clearly see through fundamentalist gender theism. This would help to explain why my trans and sports video is one of my most popular by a wide margin, and why I have noticed a similar trend on other gender-critical channels. Also, it seemed to be one of the areas in which Jangles had the least comfort. In other sections, he would go into great detail. Now, to his credit, his video wasn't focused on sport, so it makes sense that he wouldn't spend a lot of time on it. However, in my opinion, he seemed to skip over the sports section with an urgency that betrayed the weakness of his arguments relating to it. Specifically, I felt that he had used the same types of flimsy arguments here as he would later be dismissive of in other sections of the video.
I didn't have a dog in this fight. I was completely open and liberal about it until there was a case where a man who had been a man for 30 years became a woman for a little less than 2 years and then started MMA fighting women.
Yes, exactly.
Beating the fuck out of these women and not proclaiming that he or she used to be a man because what, in quotes, it was a medical condition that I did not need to disclose. Like, that's not a fucking medical condition.
Right.
And if you ever watch the fights, she wasn't winning.
Fallon Fox?
Yes. She wasn't winning because she was skillful. She was fucking manhandling these women. It was ugly.
Of course.
It was.
This is an outrage. I can't believe that the trans radicals are basing their entire movement around this one woman's career in a combat sport. The UFC is no place for this kind of violence. I mean, look at Fox just absolutely dismantle this poor woman. Clearly, anecdotes are all we need to know the facts. Still, it's good to have science on our side, too. This is an outrage. I can't believe that the trans radicals are basing their entire movement around this one woman's career in a combat sport. The UFC is no place for this kind of violence. I mean, look at Fox just absolutely dismantle this poor woman. Clearly, anecdotes are all we need to know the facts.
Still, it's good to have science on our side too.
Because of the nature of parody, I was somewhat unsure of what Jangles was trying to imply with his first sentence. So I tweeted to him and asked, were you trying to say that participation in UFC was actually trivial or incidental to the overall goals of the trans movement, so it was silly for people to treat Fallon Fox like some sort of gotcha, or something else? To which he replied, basically, yeah. Hearing this argument from Jangles reminds me of the decades before gay marriage was legalized. When the same-sex marriage campaign first started in Australia, most progressives were saying, hey, look, I don't like marriage either, but it's about equality. Gays and lesbians need to be able to get married. What is interesting about this is that support for marriage equality wasn't even a majority position within the gay community 20 years ago. Progressives have various defenses for this particular political strategy, such as the various human rights which are attached to marriage, for example, hospital visitation rights. But all of these could have been accessed through civil unions, which obviously would have gained support from a much broader section of the community much earlier. However, the mainstream bourgeois LGBT movement wanted to legalize same-sex marriage specifically, independent of any rights that it bestowed upon the wedded. The argument for why this had to be done was that it does not matter how trivial the institution is. If discrimination is permitted anywhere, it impacts the entire community. One example of this that I have heard was someone who said, I don't care about fishing, but if they didn't let gay people get fishing licenses, I would still have a problem with that, and that's why I care about same-sex marriage rights. This sounds all very well and good, but unfortunately, what seems like little more than 4 short years after same-sex marriage was legalized in the United States, gender theism is now ruining women's ability to participate in all sorts of sporting events, not to mention other forms of crucial social participation. However, for some reason, all of a sudden, every bourgeois progressive in the world seems to be fine with dismissing this obvious denial of the basic human rights of women by saying, yeah, that sucks, but I don't really give a shit about sport. Which is basically the intellectual equivalent of some dude bro being presented with the issues of same-sex marriage and responding with, who cares about weddings? I hate dresses and cake. So the question is, does discrimination in a public setting matter or not? Again, because of the nature of satire, I am not 100% sure on my interpretation of this next sentence either. However, given that I was correct in my assessment of the last point, I'm going to assume I'm correct here too. However, be sure to watch Jangles' response video to make sure. My interpretation of the sentence,
the UFC is no place for this kind of violence,
is that Jangles is implying that people should already be well aware that there is a significant chance they will be badly hurt when they choose to participate in competitions like the UFC. The implication of this statement seems to be that MMA competitions are a lawless no man's land. So much so that to draw a meaningful distinction between being injured in a fair fight against a competitor of one's own sex and having one's female skull smashed open by a man would be laughable. Apparently, to certain people outside of combat sports, mixed martial arts is all one big yucky barbarian pirate community, and basically you deserve what you get when you do this nasty thing.
Thank you all for attending this mandatory team building session. This year, instead of trust falls, we're making you all do the purge.
It's a bit like saying to someone, well, that burger had bacon in it, and bacon is cancerous, so how could you be upset that I tried to poison you? I mean, clearly you don't care about your health, so what's the big deal?
I mean, look at Fox just absolutely dismantle this poor woman. Clearly anecdotes are all we need to know the facts.
At first, I was struck with the irony of debunking an anecdote or testimonial from one of the most accomplished MMA commentators in the world by using just 7 seconds of out-of-context footage presented by a person with no apparent MMA qualifications. So clearly anecdotes are all we need to know the facts, but if you don't have an anecdote, 7 seconds of out-of-context footage is even better than that. I guess it must be some kind of science version of rock, paper, scissors or something. Now, to be clear, I have very little MMA knowledge. I don't really know what an armbar is. However, I have watched a bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a bit of UFC. So I'm not coming to this issue as some type of crazy MMA fanatic who is angry that you've done something like mistitle a chokehold. At the same time, I also don't have the squeamishness when it comes to combat sport that seems to be assumed in the premises of jokes like,
"The UFC is no place for this kind of violence."
No one is complaining about violence, they are complaining about cheating. When I saw how shallow Jangles' interrogation of Fallon Fox was, it immediately made me think that it might be of benefit to ask questions like, is Fox still fighting? The answer is no. How many fights has Fallon Fox had? Who were they against? How did they go? I already knew about Fox's last ever professional fight against Tamika Brents. As a result of this fight, Brents suffered a concussion, an orbital bone fracture, and 7 staples to the head in the first round. I had also previously seen the full fight from which Jangles had sampled the 7 seconds that he used in his video. This fight, against Ashley Evans Smith, was Fox's only recorded professional MMA loss. What is interesting is that it took place after it was publicly revealed that Fox had been born male. I imagine this meant that fighters were no longer able to be surprised by Fox's strength in quite the same way, and thus this may have allowed them to make appropriate adjustments to their strategies and tactics. For example, I watched the entirety of Fox's fight against Alana Jones. In my unqualified opinion, and the opinion of the commentators during the match, which did not include Joe Rogan, Fox fights during this match in a manner which very much resembles the description given by Joe Rogan in the clip showed in Jangles' video. Fox is not a skillful fighter, but Fox does not pay for this in the same way a female fighter would. He basically walks around the ring eating punches like the Terminator eating bullets until he finally gets his hands on Jones and is able to take the fight to the ground, where the fact that, despite having a male body, Fox has been out of breath since the first round doesn't matter so much. Tamika Brents said, "I have fought a lot of women, and have never felt the strength that I felt in a fight as I did that night. I can't answer whether it's because she was born a man or not, because I am not a doctor. I can only say I've never felt so overpowered ever in my life, and I am an abnormally strong female in my own right," she stated. Her grip was different. I could usually move around in the clinch against other females, but couldn't move at all in Fox's clinch. This statement might provide some insight as to why Fox's fighting style, the way of the lumbering Frankenstein's monster, was able to be so effective for Fallon Fox when it would obviously be ineffective for any other competitor. Also, during this process, I went to Fox's Wikipedia page, which unfortunately is written entirely in gender theist language. However, it still allows us to fill out some of Fox's backstory. Under early life, it reads, Fox was born in Toledo, Ohio. She recalls struggling with her gender as early as 5 or 6 years old. As a teenager, Fox believed she may have been a gay male, but learned the term transgender at the age 17. Fox continued living as a heterosexual male and married her then-girlfriend at the age of 19 when the latter became pregnant with their daughter. Fox then joined the US Navy to support her new family, serving as an operations specialist on the USS Enterprise. After leaving the Navy, Fox enrolled at the University of Toledo, but dropped out citing ongoing psychological stress from her unresolved gender issues. After leaving college, Fox worked as a truck driver to earn money for sex reassignment surgery. She later moved to Chicago, Illinois with her daughter. In 2006, she traveled to Bangkok, Thailand to undergo gender reassignment surgery. breast augmentation, and hair transplant surgeries at the Bangkok National Hospital. Fox was 30 years old at the time of these operations. This may potentially confirm the assessment that the trans movement may play a harmful role towards young homosexual and gender non-conforming. It also shows that Fox lived a life that was more similar to what gender theists might call a life of cis male privilege. This includes marriage, fatherhood, and a career in the military, the greatest combat sport of them all. While the military is not exclusively male, patriarchy and male privilege clearly still operate within this institution. In his entire professional MMA career, Fox took part in 6 fights, won 3 times by KO, 2 times by submission, and had 1 loss by KO. Fox fought Alicia Harper, Erica Newsom, Alana Jones, Ashley Evans Smith, Heather Bassett, and finally Tamika Brents. Fox has not had a professional fight since his 2014 match with Brents, in which he fractured Brent's skull. But apparently, all we need to know about Fallon Fox is that Fox was not in a dominant position for 7 seconds of one fight. Ostensibly, we are to interpret this to mean that any issues of fairness are now obviously neutralized. The implication seems to be that nobody has ever cheated in sports, but then also failed to win, regardless of their unfair advantage. This is obviously false, and luckily, it also brings us to the final chapter.
There's a white boy that ran track for a motherfucking living. He ran track for a motherfucking living, and he lost both his motherfucking legs. Now, I hate losers and quitters, but I feel like if you run for a motherfucking living and you lose both of your motherfucking legs, you should be allowed to sit this motherfucker out. You have done everything there was for you to do. And this motherfucker, on some gangster shit, decide not only is he gonna walk again, he decide he gonna fucking race again. Now, you got to be in tune with your fucking star player to pull this shit off, because they made him some aluminum racing legs and shit look like bent back paper clips and shit. Just don't try to act like something wrong with me. Some of you motherfuckers saw the story. You know what the fuck I'm talking about. It looked like bent back paper clips, like 2 baby boomerangs and shit. That's what he had to run on. That motherfucker had to be in tune with his star fucking player, because sometimes motherfuckers ain't gonna have your back like you think you should. And this motherfucker now gotta come in on his aluminum racing legs and race again. And he gotta try to come in and be all calm and smooth and not draw too much attention to himself. To tink, 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 tink. Motherfuckers fucking with him and shit. Yeah, you gotta go over there and sign up first before you race. Okay, motherfucker. Tink, 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 tink. Yeah, they said I gotta sign up first. It's no sign up at all. Tink, 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 tink. He all at the starting line, you know, motherfuckers fucking with him, doing all sorts of unnecessary exercises with their legs and shit. Just on your mark. Tink, 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 tink. And the craziest fucking thing happened. This motherfucker not only started running, this motherfucker started winning. And you know a hater can't stand a goddamn winner. And the last place you want to be in a motherfucking foot race is behind the motherfucker with no goddamn foots. That's the last. I bet that motherfucker was mad as shit. My legs tired. Ain't your legs tired? His legs ain't tired. He just take. Just paper clips and sparks everywhere. Just take. But you gonna have to be in tune with your star fucking player, cause these haters do not play fair. These hating ass motherfuckers at the Olympic Committee let this motherfucker race and then waited till he won and then disqualified him and said, and I quote, he had an unfair advantage. Are you talking about the motherfucker running with no goddamn legs? That's who the fuck you talking about? Poor little tink. Think about that when you think you having a bad goddamn day.
Now, you can read the Oscar Pistorius Wikipedia page yourself, but his significance here is to demonstrate how heated and intense the debate was when it concerned the advantages that a disabled athlete might have over able-bodied male athletes. It should be known that eventually Pistorius was able to compete in Olympic events. He also murdered his wife, but that's another story. The intensity of the scrutiny he faced when society thought he was potentially fucking up men's sport was endlessly more intense than the scrutiny faced by countless trans-identified male athletes who are currently ruining women's sport in exactly the same way it was feared Pistorius might. However, while Pistorius was able to prove in a court of law that his prosthetics did not give him an unfair athletic advantage, on the other hand, the evidence on the courts, fields, and gyms across the sporting world seems to be clearly demonstrating in a variety of competitions that trans-identified males have a clear advantage over women athletes. This is why I believe sport is an arena in which gender theism comes into such stark contrast with reality that even people who are normally supportive of other misogynistic or homophobic concepts will still often find gender theism to be too divorced from reality for them to be able to fully accept or internalize this worldview.
I didn't have a dog in this fight. I was completely open and liberal about it until there was a case where a man who had been a man for 30 years became a woman for a little less than 2 years and then started MMA fighting women.
Yes, exactly.
Beating the fuck out of these women and not proclaiming that he or she used to be a man because in quotes, it was a medical condition that I did not need to disclose. Like, that's not a fucking medical condition.
Right.
And if you ever watch the fights, she
like
wasn't winning.
Is this Fallon Fox?
Yes.
Yeah.
She wasn't winning because she was skillful. She was fucking manhandling these women. It was ugly.
Of course.
She was fucking manhandling these women.
Still, it's good to have science on our side, too.
Well, I guess it would be nice if I could touch your body. I know not everybody has got a body like me, but I gotta think twice before I give my heart away. And I know all the games you play, 'cause I play them too. Oh, but I need some time off from that emotion. Time to pick my heart up off the floor. When that love comes down without devotion.
You and I started Fight Club together. You remember that?
But I'm showing you that door right